The stagecoach rattled into Johnson City, Texas, on a scorching afternoon in July of 1876, carrying a woman who hadn't spoken a single word during the entire journey from San Antonio. And when she finally stepped down onto the dusty street, the other passengers seemed relieved to see her go. Lily Bradford clutched a worn carpetbag against her chest, her dress buttoned high despite the oppressive heat that shimmered off the dirt roads. The fabric of her long sleeves clung to her arms, damp with perspiration, but she made no move to roll them up, even as other women on the street fanned themselves desperately and sought shade wherever they could find it. Her dark blonde hair was pinned severely back from a face that might have been beautiful if not for the haunted look in her green eyes, the kind of expression that suggested she had seen things no person should ever witness. Johnson City was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a main street that seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions under the relentless Texas sun. The general store stood across from a saloon, and further down she could see a hotel, a blacksmith shop with its forge glowing orange, even in the afternoon heat, and what appeared to be a modest church at the far end of town. Dust devils danced between the buildings, and the air smelled of horses, leather, and the distinctive dry scent of prairie grass. She had come here because she had nowhere else to go. Her aunt had written 6 months ago, offering her a position helping at the boarding house she ran on the edge of town. It was charity, really, disguised as employment, but Lily had learned not to be proud about such things. Pride was a luxury for people who had choices, and she had left her choices behind in Missouri, along with everything else from her old life. The boarding house was a two-story structure painted white, though the paint had begun to peel in places, revealing weathered gray wood beneath. A porch wrapped around the front, offering blessed shade, and flower boxes attempted to bring color to the austere facade, though the petals were wilted from the heat. Lily approached slowly, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. Her aunt opened the door before she could knock. Martha Bennett was a sturdy woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and a no-nonsense expression that softened only slightly when she saw her niece. "You made it," she said, and there was genuine relief in her voice. "Come inside before you melt out there." The interior of the boarding house was marginally cooler, with curtains drawn against the afternoon sun and windows propped open to catch any hint of breeze. The front room served as a parlor where boarders could gather, with mismatched furniture that had clearly seen better days but was scrupulously clean. The smell of something savory drifted from what must be the kitchen, making Lily realize she hadn't eaten since early morning. "You look exhausted," Martha said, studying her with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "When did you last have a proper meal?" "Yesterday," Lily lied. It had been 2 days, but she didn't want to seem more pathetic than she already felt. "We will fix that immediately, but first let me show you your room. You will be staying in the small one off the kitchen. It is not much, but it is private, and you will have your own space." Martha led her through a narrow hallway, past a dining room with a long table that could seat at least a dozen people, and into the kitchen where a large stove dominated one wall. A door in the corner opened into a tiny room barely large enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small chest of drawers. "It is perfect," Lily said, and meant it. Privacy was another luxury she had learned not to take for granted. Martha set her hands on her hips, a gesture Lily remembered from childhood visits. "I will not pry into what brought you here," she said firmly. "Your mother's letter said you needed a fresh start, and that is all I need to know. You will help me with cooking and cleaning, serving meals and changing linens. In return, you get room and board and a small wage. The work is hard but honest. Does that suit you?" "Yes, madam. Thank you." The boarders are mostly working men. Cowboys, ranch hands, a few who work at the lumber mill south of town. They are rough around the edges, but generally respectful. Any man who causes trouble gets thrown out, no exceptions. Martha's expression hardened. "Has anyone given you trouble? You come directly to me. Understood?" Lily nodded, though the idea of men causing trouble made her stomach clench with old fear. She pulled her sleeves down further, ensuring they covered her wrists completely. That evening, she helped Martha prepare supper for the boarders. The work was familiar and oddly comforting, the rhythm of chopping vegetables and stirring pots requiring no thought, leaving her mind free to drift. 6 men filed into the dining room when Martha rang the bell, taking their seats with the easy familiarity of long-term residents. They nodded politely to Lily as she helped serve platters of beef stew and fresh bread, their curiosity evident but mostly restrained, all except one. Jake Callahan sat at the far end of the table, and from the moment Lily entered the room, she could feel his gaze following her. Not in the predatory way she had learned to recognize and fear, but with an intensity that made her nervous nonetheless. He was younger than most of the other boarders, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and blue eyes that seemed to see far more than she wanted to reveal. His face was tanned from long hours in the sun, with a strong jaw and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily, though he wasn't smiling now. He wore the typical attire of a working cowboy, dusty denim pants, and a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. A bandana was tied loosely around his neck, and his hat hung on a peg by the door along with several others. When she set the bread basket near his plate, he said, "Thank you, miss," in a voice that was surprisingly gentle. "You are welcome," she replied softly, not meeting his eyes. The next morning, Lily woke before dawn to help Martha prepare breakfast. The routine was the same: cook, serve, clean, and then start preparing for the next meal. Between meals, there were rooms to tidy, linens to wash, and 100 other small tasks that kept a boarding house running. The work was exhausting, but Lily welcomed it. Exhaustion meant she slept deeply when night finally came, too tired for the nightmares that had plagued her for months. Days turned into weeks, and she began to learn the rhythms of the household. Most of the boarders left early in the morning and returned in the evening, tired and hungry. Jake Callahan worked at the Double C Ranch about 5 miles outside town, breaking horses and managing cattle. He was good at his job, Martha said with approval, and saved most of his wages, rather than drinking them away like some of the cowboys who came through town. "He is a steady one," Martha commented one afternoon as they kneaded bread dough in the kitchen. "Been boarding here for almost 2 years. Has plans to buy his own land someday, start his own ranch. Not like some of these drifters who never think past the next bottle of whiskey." Lily made a non-committal sound. She had been trying very hard not to notice Jake Callahan, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. He had a habit of staying behind after breakfast to help carry the heavy dishes back to the kitchen, waving off Martha's protests. "Got strong arms," he would say with an easy grin. "Might as well use them for something other than wrestling stubborn horses." He was unfailingly polite, but there was something in the way he looked at her that made Lily's heart race with an emotion she couldn't quite name. It wasn't fear, which confused her. Fear had become her constant companion over the past year, as familiar as her own shadow. But when Jake looked at her, she felt something different, something that felt dangerously close to hope. One evening in late August, Lily was clearing the table after supper when she reached across to collect a plate, and her sleeve caught on the corner of the serving platter. The fabric pulled up several inches before she could yank it back down, but not before Jake, who was sitting right there, saw the livid scars that crisscrossed her forearm. Raised welts, some old and silvered with time, others newer and still pink. Burns and cuts layered over each other in a map of suffering. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The room seemed to tilt around her as panic clawed its way up from her chest. She waited for the questions, the disgust, the accusations that she must have done something to deserve such treatment. Instead, Jake very carefully set down his coffee cup and said in that same gentle voice he always used with her, "Miss Bradford, would you mind stepping outside with me for a moment? I believe I saw a loose board on the porch that needs attention before someone trips." It was an obvious fabrication. Martha looked up sharply from where she was serving pie, her eyes moving between them with sudden understanding. "Go on," she said quietly. "I can finish here." Lily's hands were shaking as she followed Jake out onto the porch. The evening air was finally beginning to cool after the brutal heat of the day, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and purple as the sun sank toward the horizon. She stood rigidly by the railing, her arms wrapped around herself, waiting for whatever was coming. Jake leaned against the porch post, his posture deliberately casual and non-threatening. For a long moment, he just looked out at the street, watching a wagon roll past. Then he said, "My sister had scars like that." The words hung in the air between them. Lily's throat was too tight to respond. "Her husband did it," Jake continued, his voice flat now, stripped of its usual warmth. "Started a few months after they married. By the time my family found out, she was so scared she wouldn't leave him. Said she deserved it, that she wasn't a good enough wife." He was quiet for a moment, his jaw working. "She died 2 years ago. He beat her so badly one night that she never woke up. He told the sheriff she fell down the stairs." "I am sorry," Lily whispered, the first personal words she had spoken to him beyond basic pleasantries. "I am sorry, too. Sorry I didn't see it sooner. Didn't do more to help her." He turned to look at her then, and his blue eyes were fierce with emotion. "I won't make that mistake again." "It wasn't your fault," she said automatically, recognizing the guilt that shadowed his expression because she saw it in her own mirror every morning. "Wasn't yours either." He said it with such certainty that something inside her chest cracked open, letting in a sliver of light she hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. "Whatever happened to you, whatever someone did to put those scars on your arms, it wasn't your fault and you didn't deserve it." Tears burned behind her eyes, but she fought them back. She had cried so much in Missouri, cried until she had no tears left. She didn't want to start again. "You don't know what happened. Don't need to know the details to know the truth of it." He shifted his weight, and she noticed his hands were clenched into fists at his sides, but his voice remained gentle when he spoke. "You're safe now. I know that probably doesn't mean much coming from a stranger, and I know trust isn't something you can just decide to have. But I want you to know that here, in this town, in this house, you are safe. And if whoever hurt you ever shows his face around here, he will answer to me." The certainty in his voice, the quiet fury on her behalf from a man who owed her nothing, broke something loose inside her. A sob escaped before she could stop it, and then she was crying after all. Months of fear and pain and shame pouring out in ugly, wrenching gasps. Jake didn't move toward her, didn't try to touch her or comfort her physically, as if he understood instinctively that she needed space. Instead, he just stayed there, a solid presence on the porch, letting her cry without judgment or impatience. When the storm finally passed and she was left hiccuping and exhausted, he pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and held it out to her. "Thank you," she managed, pressing the cloth to her face. "You don't need to thank me for basic human decency," he said, "but you are welcome all the same." They stood together in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of the town settling in for the night. Somewhere down the street, a piano was playing in the saloon. Closer by, crickets had begun their evening chorus. The moment felt suspended somehow, as if the world had paused just for them. "My husband," Lily said suddenly, surprising herself. She hadn't spoken about Richard to anyone except her mother, and even then only in the barest terms necessary to explain why she needed to leave. "He is my husband. We married 3 years ago. I was 18 and he was 30, and everyone said I was lucky to catch such an established man." Jake's expression darkened, but he didn't interrupt. "It started small. Criticism about my cooking, my appearance, how I kept the house. Then it escalated. If dinner wasn't ready exactly when he wanted it, or if I spoke when he wanted silence, or if I looked at another man, even accidentally." She touched her sleeve, the fabric rough under her fingertips. "He would lock me in the cellar sometimes for days, or put out his cigars on my arms. Said he was teaching me to be a proper wife." "Where is he now?" The question was asked very carefully, as if Jake was working hard to control his tone. "Missouri, I ran when he went on a business trip to St. Louis, took what little money I had saved, and bought a ticket on the first stagecoach heading west. I wrote to my aunt from San Antonio, begging for help. She looked at Jake fully for the first time since coming outside, needing him to understand. He will look for me. Richard doesn't like to lose his possessions, and that is how he sees me. When he discovers where I have gone, he will come. Then we will be ready, Jake said simply. You are not alone anymore, Lily. You have your aunt, and you have this town, and you have me. I give you my word, he will not hurt you again. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe that someone could actually keep her safe. But she had believed Richard when he promised to love and cherish her, and look how that had turned out. Trust was a bridge that had been burned to ashes. As if reading her thoughts, Jake said, I don't expect you to trust me right away. Trust is something that has to be earned, especially when it has been broken the way yours was. But I am a patient man, and I am not going anywhere. Take all the time you need. They went back inside shortly after, and if Martha noticed Lily's red eyes, she didn't comment. The evening routine continued as normal, but something fundamental had shifted. A secret shared, a burden made lighter by being spoken aloud. Over the following weeks, Lily found herself watching Jake when she thought he wasn't looking. Watching the careful way he moved around her, always making sure she knew he was there before coming close. Watching how he treated the other boarders with easy camaraderie but never with cruelty, even in jest. Watching how he was kind to Martha, complimenting her cooking and fixing things around the house without being asked. He had started staying behind after breakfast more often, but now instead of just helping with dishes, he would tell her stories while they worked. Stories about growing up on a ranch in West Texas, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the time he and his brother had tried to rope a longhorn and ended up in the water trough. He made her laugh, something she had thought she might never do again. In return, slowly, carefully, she began to tell him pieces of her own story. Not about Richard, but about the time before, about growing up in a small town in Missouri, about her father who had been a school teacher and her mother who made the best apple pie in 3 counties, about her love of reading and her dream once upon a time of becoming a teacher herself. You still could, Jake said one morning as they worked side by side in the kitchen. Johnson City doesn't have a school yet, but there is talk of starting one. Town is growing, more families moving in. They will need a teacher. I never finished my own schooling, Lily said, scrubbing at a stubborn pot. I married Richard right after my 18th birthday. You are one of the most well-spoken people I have ever met, Jake countered. And I have seen the books in your room. You are always reading. She flushed, both at the compliment and the realization that he had noticed such details about her. That is different from being qualified to teach. Maybe. Or maybe you are just scared to want something good because you are afraid it will be taken away. The observation was too accurate to be comfortable. She set down the pot with more force than necessary. You don't know me well enough to say things like that. You are right, he said immediately. I apologize. I overstepped. She sighed, feeling guilty for snapping. No, I am sorry. You are probably right. I am scared. Of everything, it seems like these days. That is understandable given what you have been through. But being scared doesn't mean you have to let fear make all your decisions. He dried his hands on a towel and turned to face her fully. You are stronger than you think, Lily Bradford. You escaped a dangerous situation and traveled hundreds of miles to start over in a place where you knew only one person. That takes incredible courage. It felt more like desperation than courage. Sometimes they are the same thing. September brought slightly cooler temperatures and news that the Double C Ranch was hiring extra hands for the fall cattle drive. Jake would be gone for nearly a month, helping drive a herd north to the railhead in Abilene. The night before he was set to leave, he found Lily in the garden behind the boarding house, where she had taken to spending her evenings, tending the vegetables and herbs Martha used in her cooking. I wanted to say goodbye, he said, hat in hand. We leave before dawn tomorrow. Lily set down her watering can, suddenly struck by how much she would miss his presence. Over the past 2 months, he had become a fixture in her days, as reliable as sunrise. The thought of the boarding house without him felt wrong somehow. Be safe, she said. I have heard cattle drives can be dangerous. I have done a dozen of them. I will be fine. He hesitated, then said, I spoke to Sheriff Morrison yesterday. Told him there might be a man coming around asking about you. Didn't give him details, but I suggested he should be wary of strangers asking too many questions about the women in town. Her heart clenched with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Do you really think Richard will find me? I don't know, but I would rather be prepared if he does. He took a step closer, still carefully maintaining distance, but near enough that she could see the concern in his blue eyes. Promise me something. What? If he shows up while I am gone, you go straight to the sheriff. Don't try to handle it alone. Don't let him convince you to go anywhere with him. Just get to the sheriff and let the law handle it. The law didn't help me in Missouri. Saucy, she said bitterly. I went to the sheriff there once after Richard broke my ribs. He said what happened between a man and his wife was not his concern. Jake's jaw tightened. Sheriff Morrison is a better man than that. He will help you, I promise. And Martha will help you. You have people on your side now. She wanted to argue, to point out all the ways this could go wrong, but the earnest hope in his expression stopped her. All right, she said instead, I promise. He smiled then, that easy grin that transformed his whole face. Good, I will be back before you know it. Try not to miss me too much. Conceited cowboy, she said, but there was no heat in it, and his grin only widened. That is more like it. I like it when you give me sass. He settled his hat back on his head. Goodbye, Lily. See you in October. She watched him walk away, his long stride carrying him back toward the boarding house, and had to resist the urge to call him back. Instead, she whispered to the empty garden, I will miss you anyway. The boarding house felt quieter without Jake. 2 other boarders had also gone on the cattle drive, leaving Martha and Lily with only 3 men to cook for. The work was lighter, which should have been a relief, but instead, Lily found the extra time made her restless. She took on additional tasks, scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing, and reorganizing cupboards that were already perfectly organized, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. Martha watched her with knowing eyes, but said nothing until one afternoon when Lily had spent an hour beating dust out of perfectly clean rugs. That poor rug didn't do anything to deserve such violence, she commented dryly. You are going to wear a hole in it. Lily set down the rug beater, breathing hard from exertion. I just wanted to be thorough. You are pining for Jake Callahan, and you are too stubborn to admit it. The blunt statement made Lily's face flame. I am not pining. I barely know him. You know him well enough to light up like a lantern whenever he walks into a room, and do not think I haven't noticed him doing the same around you. Martha folded her arms across her ample chest. There is nothing wrong with caring for someone, Lily. You are allowed to have feelings. I am married, Lily said, the words tasting like poison. Even if I wanted to care for Jake, which I am not saying I do, it would be wrong. I made vows. Vows that were broken the first time that man raised his hand to you. Martha's voice was fierce now. Marriage is a covenant between 2 people, not a prison sentence. He violated that covenant in every way possible. You don't owe Richard anything, certainly not your loyalty. The law sees it differently. The law is written by men who have never been at the mercy of a brutal husband. But we are not talking about the law right now. We are talking about your heart. Martha's expression softened. I know you are scared. I know trusting another man feels impossible after what you have endured. But Jake is not Richard. He is a good man with an honorable heart, and he cares about you deeply. Anyone with eyes can see it. Even if that is true, I have nothing to offer him. I am broken, Martha. Damaged. He deserves someone whole. Martha crossed the distance between them and took Lily's face in her work-roughened hands. You listen to me. Girl, you are not broken. You are wounded, yes. You have been hurt in ways no person should ever be hurt. But wounded is not the same as broken. Wounds heal, and you are already healing. I have watched you grow stronger every day since you arrived. You smile now. You laugh. You have started to live again instead of just surviving. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. What if he comes back? What if Richard finds me and takes me back to Missouri? Then we will fight him, all of us, together. You are not alone anymore, and the sooner you truly believe that, the sooner you can start building a real life here. Martha pulled her into a tight hug, and Lily clung to her aunt like a drowning woman to a lifeline. The weeks passed slowly. Lily threw herself into her work and tried not to count the days until Jake's return. She made friends with some of the other women in town, hesitantly at first, but they welcomed her warmly. Mrs. Patterson, the preacher's wife, invited her to join a sewing circle that met on Thursday afternoons. Miss Emily Watts, who ran the general store with her father, shared novels with her and discussed them over cups of tea. For the first time since leaving Missouri, Lily began to feel like she might actually have a future. Not just survival, but an actual life with friends and purpose and small joys. The constant knot of fear in her stomach loosened slightly, though it never entirely went away. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in early October, Richard walked into the boarding house. Lily was in the dining room, setting the table for supper, when she heard the front door open. She called out, "We are not serving meals yet. Supper is at 6 o'clock." Without looking up from arranging the silverware. "Hello, Lily." The voice stopped her heart. The fork in her hand clattered to the floor as she spun around, her whole body going cold despite the warmth of the room. Richard Bradford stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed as always in a tailored suit that must have cost more than Martha made in 6 months. His brown hair was pomaded back from a face that would have been handsome if not for the cruel set of his mouth. He was smiling, but it was the smile of a predator cornering prey. "You led me on quite a chase," he said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. "St. Louis, then San Antonio, then here to this dusty little nothing of a town. I have been searching for 3 months." Lily couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the roaring panic in her ears. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. She was frozen, transported back to their house in Missouri, to the cellar, to the pain and fear and helplessness. "You have lost weight," Richard continued, moving further into the room with slow, deliberate steps. "You look terrible. This is what comes from your foolish rebellion, you see. You cannot take care of yourself properly. You need me. Get out!" The words came from somewhere deep inside, a core of strength she hadn't known still existed. "You have no right to be here." His smile disappeared. "I have every right. You are my wife. You belong to me. Now stop this nonsense and get your things. We are going home. This is my home now. I am not going anywhere with you." She saw the rage flare in his eyes, saw his hand start to rise in the gesture that preceded so much pain, and this time her legs did work. She bolted for the kitchen, screaming for Martha. Richard caught her before she made it 3 steps, his hand closing around her arm like a vice. The old fear swamped her, and for a horrible moment she was powerless again, nothing but an object to be controlled. Then Martha burst through the kitchen door with a cast-iron skillet in her hand and murder in her eyes. "Get your hands off my niece, or so help me God! I will cave in your skull." Richard looked at the older woman with contempt. "This is a private family matter. Mind your business, old woman. She is my family, which makes it my business. You have 3 seconds to let go of her." Martha raised the skillet meaningfully. 1. You wouldn't dare. 2. The law. 3. Martha swung the skillet with surprising speed and strength. Richard barely managed to dodge, releasing Lily's arm to stumble backwards. "You're both insane," he snarled. Fine, keep her for now. But this is not over, Lily. You are my wife, and you will come home with me eventually. You cannot run forever. Want to bet? Martha advanced with the skillet still raised. Get out of my house before I forget I am a Christian woman. Richard straightened his jacket with sharp, angry movements. I will be back with the sheriff. We will see how brave you are when the law is on my side. He pointed at Lily, who had collapsed into a chair, shaking violently. You made vows before God. You cannot escape them or me. He left in a swirl of expensive cologne and impotent rage, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Martha immediately dropped the skillet and gathered Lily into her arms. You are all right. You are safe. I have got you. He found me, Lily gasped through chattering teeth. I knew he would, but I still hoped. I thought maybe. Shh. We will handle this. Let me take you to the sheriff right now, before Richard can poison him with lies. Sheriff Morrison's office was a small building next to the general store, with a jail cell in the back that was rarely occupied. The sheriff himself was a man in his late 50s, with gray streaking his brown hair and a weathered face that had seen its share of trouble. He listened carefully as Martha and Lily explained the situation, his expression growing progressively grimmer. Show me your arms, he said finally, his voice gentle. Lily hesitated, then slowly pushed up her sleeves. In the bright afternoon light streaming through the office window, the scars were starkly visible, a horrific testament to years of abuse. Sheriff Morrison was silent for a long moment, his jaw working. Then he said, I need you to understand something, Mrs. Bradford. The law in Texas, in most of America really, does not look kindly on wives who leave their husbands. As much as I might personally find it abhorrent, a man has considerable leeway in how he treats his wife. She is considered his property in the eyes of the law. Lily's heart sank. It was Missouri all over again. But the sheriff wasn't finished. However, he continued, his tone hardening, I have been a lawman for 30 years, and I have seen what happens when men are given free rein to abuse those weaker than them. I have scraped too many dead women off floors and heard too many excuses from the men who killed them. So here is what is going to happen. When your husband comes to my office, which he surely will, I am going to tell him that we take a dim view of domestic violence in Johnson City. I am going to tell him that if he lays one finger on you, I will arrest him for assault and make sure every newspaper in Texas knows about it. And I am going to strongly suggest he return to Missouri and file for divorce if he is so unhappy with his wife. Will that work? Martha asked skeptically. Probably not. Men like him don't respond to reason, but it will buy us time and establish that this town stands with Miss Lily. He looked at Lily directly. You have friends here, Mrs. Bradford. You are not alone in this fight. And when Jake Callahan gets back from that cattle drive and finds out what happened, your husband is going to have even more to worry about. Despite everything, Lily felt a small flicker of hope. Thank you, Sheriff. Don't thank me yet. This is far from over. Richard did indeed show up at the sheriff's office an hour later, demanding that Morrison force Lily to return with him. The conversation, which could be heard through the thin walls of the general store next door, grew heated. In the end, Richard stormed out empty-handed but no less determined. Over the next week, he haunted Johnson City like a malevolent spirit. He took a room at the hotel and made a point of appearing wherever Lily went, watching her with cold eyes, making sure she knew he was there. He spoke to townspeople, spinning stories about his poor, mentally unstable wife who had run away in a fit of hysteria. Some people believed him. A well-dressed, articulate man from a good family was easy to trust. But most of the people who mattered didn't. The sewing circle ladies rallied around Lily, and their husbands rallied around them. Mr. Watts banned Richard from the general store after he tried to interrogate Emily about Lily's habits. The preacher gave a sermon on Sunday about the sanctity of protecting the vulnerable that had Richard leaving the church red-faced with fury. Lily felt like she was living in a state of siege, constantly looking over her shoulder, jumping at every sound. She stopped going out unless absolutely necessary, and even then only with Martha or another woman accompanying her. The freedom she had been building crumbled under the weight of fear. Jake returned on a Saturday morning, trail-worn and exhausted from a month of hard travel. He came directly to the boarding house, not even stopping at his room first, and found Lily in the kitchen where she was helping Martha prepare dinner. The smile that lit his face when he saw her died the instant he registered her expression. What happened? In halting words, punctuated by Martha's sharp interjections, they told him about Richard's arrival and the week of harassment that had followed. With each sentence, Jake's expression grew darker and more dangerous. By the time they finished, his hands were clenched into fists and his jaw was set in a hard line. Where is he now? The question was clipped, barely controlled. The hotel, most likely, Martha said. Jake, don't do anything foolish. Sheriff Morrison is handling it. The sheriff is doing what he can within the law. I am not constrained by the same limitations. He looked at Lily, and his eyes were blazing with protective fury. I told you that you were safe. I meant it. This ends today. Jake, please, Lily said, catching his arm without thinking. The contact startled them both. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched him. Don't get hurt because of me. Don't risk getting arrested or worse. His expression softened fractionally. I am not going to get hurt, and I am not going to do anything that will land me in jail. I am simply going to have a conversation with your husband and explain how things are going to be from now on. He won't listen to reason. Then it is fortunate I am not planning to be reasonable. He covered her hand with his own, his touch warm and solid. Trust me, Lily, please. She looked into his eyes and saw the same steadiness that had drawn her from the beginning, the same quiet strength that had made her feel, for the first time in years, like maybe she was worth protecting. All right, she whispered. I trust you. The words seemed to mean something more than the situation warranted. Jake's expression shifted, becoming almost tender. That means more than you know, he said quietly. Then he straightened, the dangerous edge returning. Stay here, I will be back soon. He found Richard in the hotel saloon, nursing a whiskey and looking thoroughly displeased with the world. Several other cowboys from the Double C were there as well, and they nodded to Jake as he entered. Word had clearly spread about the situation. In a small town, there were few secrets. Jake walked directly to Richard's table and sat down without invitation. We need to talk? Richard looked him up and down with barely concealed disdain. I have nothing to say to a common ranch hand. That is fine. You can listen instead. Jake leaned back in his chair, his posture deceptively relaxed. Here is how this is going to work. You are going to leave Johnson City tomorrow morning. You are going to go back to Missouri, and you are going to file for divorce. You are going to cite irreconcilable differences or desertion or whatever legal fiction makes you feel better about yourself, and you are never going to bother Lily again. Richard laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. And why would I do that? She is my wife, my property. Because if you don't, your life is going to become very uncomfortable. This is a small town, but that means we take care of our own. And Lily is one of ours now. Jake's voice was mild, almost pleasant, which somehow made the underlying threat more menacing. You might find that your hotel room keeps having problems. Mice in your bed, scorpions in your boots, that sort of thing. You might find that no restaurant will serve you, no store will sell to you. You might find that the road back to the train station is surprisingly dangerous for a man traveling alone. Are you threatening me? I am explaining reality. You are not welcome here, and the longer you stay, the worse things will get. Jake leaned forward slightly. But more than that, I want you to understand something. You hurt Lily for years, made her believe she was worthless and weak, but she found the courage to escape you, to travel hundreds of miles alone, to build a new life for herself. That takes more strength than a coward like you will ever possess. She is extraordinary, and you never deserved her. She is a disobedient wife who needs discipline. The words were barely out of Richard's mouth before Jake's hand shot across the table, gripping the other man's wrist with crushing force. You will never touch her again, he said, and there was nothing mild in his voice now. You will never speak to her again. If I ever see you within 100 miles of Johnson City, I will make you regret the day you were born. Are we clear? For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Richard's face. Whatever he saw in Jake's eyes convinced him this was not an idle threat. You cannot keep her, he said, but he sounded less certain now. She is legally my wife. Then set her free. Sign divorce papers and move on with your life. Find some other woman to torment, though I suggest you don't. But leave Lily alone. Jake released his wrist and stood, looking down at the man who had caused so much suffering. You have until noon tomorrow. If you are still here after that, you will discover that Texas justice is very different from Missouri justice. He walked out of the saloon without looking back, several of his fellow cowboys falling into step beside him in a show of solidarity. Behind him, Richard sat alone at his table, rubbing his wrist and looking considerably less confident than he had an hour ago. True to Jake's ultimatum, Richard checked out of the hotel the next morning and took the noon stage back towards San Antonio and the rail line that would carry him back to Missouri. Lily watched from the boarding house window as the coach pulled away, hardly daring to believe it was real. He's really gone, she whispered. Jake, who had stationed himself at the boarding house since the previous day, stood beside her. He's gone, and if he has any sense, he will stay gone. How did you convince him? I explained the situation in terms he could understand. At her questioning look, he smiled slightly. I didn't hurt him, if that is what you are worried about. Just made it clear that his presence was not welcomed and would become increasingly unpleasant if he persisted. Lily turned to face him fully. This man who had defended her without asking for anything in return, who had made her feel safe when she had thought safety was impossible. Thank you, she said, knowing the words were inadequate but needing to say them anyway. Thank you for coming back, for standing up to him, for everything. You don't need to thank me for caring about you, Lily. He reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I would do it 1,000 times over. The touch was feather-light, reverent almost, and it sent a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the Texas sun. She realized, standing there in the dining room with dust motes dancing in the afternoon light, that she was falling in love with Jake Callahan. Maybe had been falling for months, too scared and broken to recognize it for what it was. Jake, she started, not sure what she wanted to say, but needing to say something. He seemed to understand anyway. I know, he said softly. I know you are still legally married, and I know you have been through hell and need time to heal. I am not asking you for anything, Lily. I just want you to know that I am here, and I will wait as long as it takes. What if Richard never grants a divorce? What if I am trapped in this marriage forever? Then we will figure it out together. Texas is a long way from Missouri, and not every bond has to be legal to be real. He smiled at her, and it was full of such gentle affection that her heart ached. I am a patient man, remember, and you are worth waiting for. In the months that followed, Lily slowly began to rebuild her life. Richard did send divorce papers eventually, perhaps realizing that holding on to a wife who hated him was more trouble than it was worth. The process took nearly a year, grinding through legal channels with frustrating slowness, but finally, in the summer of 1877, Lily received official notice that her marriage had been dissolved. She was free. By then, Jake had become the center of her world, though their relationship remained carefully chaste. He courted her the way she should have been courted the first time, with respect and patience and genuine interest in who she was as a person. They took walks together through Johnson City, talking about everything and nothing. He brought her books he thought she would enjoy and listened attentively when she discussed them. He made her laugh with stories of misadventures at the ranch and held her when nightmares left her shaking in the middle of the night. Slowly, touch by careful touch, he helped her reclaim her body as her own. A hand held while walking, an arm around her shoulders during a thunderstorm. Eventually, after months of gradual progression, a kiss on the porch one evening that was so sweet and gentle it made her cry with something other than sadness for the first time in years. "I love you," she told him on a warm August night, the words feeling both terrifying and necessary. "I think I have loved you since you said I was safe, but I was too scared to admit it." Jake pulled her close, and she marveled at how his embrace felt nothing like a cage, but rather like coming home. "I have loved you since the first moment I saw you walk into that dining room," he confessed. "You looked so lost and so brave at the same time, and I thought, this is a woman worth knowing. I have only fallen deeper every day since." They were married in September of 1877 in a small ceremony at the church with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Martha cried through the whole thing, and even Sheriff Morrison looked suspiciously misty-eyed. Lily wore a simple dress in cream-colored silk with long sleeves that she had chosen deliberately, no longer trying to hide her scars, but acknowledging them as part of her story. Jake said his vows with utter conviction, promising to love and honor her, to stand beside her as an equal partner, to build a life together based on respect and trust. When it came time for Lily to say her vows, she looked into his blue eyes and saw her future reflected there, bright and full of possibility. "I promise to love you," she said clearly, her voice carrying through the church. "To trust you with my heart, even though that is the scariest thing I have ever done. To build a life with you that is full of laughter and kindness and all the things I thought I had lost forever. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for making me feel safe when I thought safety was impossible. I choose you, Jake Callahan, today and every day for the rest of my life." There was not a dry eye in the church. They moved into a small house on the edge of town, a modest two-story structure with a porch and a garden that Lily immediately began planning. Jake had been promoted to foreman at the Double C Ranch, and with their combined savings, they were able to make the house into a real home. Lily started teaching children in the front room, unofficial at first, but within a year, the town had established a proper school and hired her as Johnson City's first teacher. Life was not perfect. Lily still had nightmares sometimes, and there were days when unexpected sounds or gestures would send her spiraling back into old fears. But Jake was always there, steady and patient, reminding her that she was safe, that he loved her, that the past could not hurt her anymore. They had their first child in 1879, a son they named James Benjamin, after Jake's father and Lily's father. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's easy temperament, and he was doted on by half the town. A daughter, Sarah Rose, followed 2 years later, with Jake's dark hair and Lily's sharp mind. Martha, who had moved into a cottage Jake built for her on their property, was a constant presence, spoiling her great niece and nephew outrageously and offering Lily the kind of motherly support she had missed during her years with Richard. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Jake found Lily sitting on their porch, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson. He settled beside her, slipping an arm around her waist in the easy way of long familiarity. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different my life is now from what it was," she said honestly. 5 years ago, I thought I would spend the rest of my life being afraid, believing I deserved the pain. Now I have you and the children and this beautiful life. Sometimes it feels almost like a dream." "It is not a dream," Jake assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "It is real, and you deserve every bit of it. You deserve happiness, Lily. You always did." She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers, and marveled at how far she had come. The scars on her arms were still there, faded now to silvery lines that she no longer bothered to hide. They were part of her story, proof that she had survived something terrible and come out the other side stronger. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Taking on someone with so much baggage?" "Not for a single second," Jake said firmly. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. You made me better, Lily. You taught me what real courage looks like. You gave me my life back, she countered. You made me believe I could be something more than a victim. We saved each other, he said simply. That is what love is supposed to do. They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, comfortable in the silence, secure in the knowledge that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Years continued to pass in the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. Jake eventually bought his own ranch, a modest spread about 3 miles from town where he raised horses and cattle. Lily continued teaching, becoming known throughout the county as an exceptional educator who had a particular gift for reaching troubled children. She understood, perhaps better than most, what it meant to feel broken and afraid. They had two more children, another son named William Thomas in 1883, and a surprise baby daughter, Emma Grace, in 1886. Their house was always full of noise and laughter, a stark contrast to the terrible silence of Lily's first marriage. Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1889, and they buried her in the Johnson City Cemetery under a sprawling oak tree. She had lived to see Lily truly happy, truly free, and that was a gift beyond measure. Richard died in 1891 in Missouri from a heart ailment, according to the brief notice that appeared in the local paper. Lily felt nothing when she read the news except perhaps a distant sadness for the man he might have been if he had chosen differently. His death changed nothing. She had stopped being his wife in any meaningful way the moment she stepped on that stagecoach to Texas. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Jake surprised Lily with a trip to San Antonio. They left the children in the capable hands of their eldest son, James, who was 19 now and responsible beyond his years, and took the train south for a weekend that felt gloriously indulgent. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants where other people served them, and walked along the river in the evenings. On their last night, as they prepared for bed, Jake watched Lily brush out her hair, still dark blonde but threaded now with silver. You are even more beautiful now than the day I met you, he said. Lily laughed, gesturing at herself in the mirror. I have 4 children, and I am nearly 40 years old. You need spectacles, Cowboy. My eyesight is perfect, he insisted, coming to stand behind her. He ran his hands down her arms, over the faded scars that had been the first secret she shared with him. You're beautiful because you are happy, because when you smile now, it reaches your eyes, because you walk like a woman who owns her own life instead of one who is trying to disappear. She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had been her salvation and her partner, her best friend, and the love of her life. I never thought I could be this happy, she confessed. Some days I still can't quite believe it's real. It is real, he promised, echoing words he had said years ago on another porch in another lifetime. You are safe, you are loved, and you always will be. They kissed then, a kiss full of 20 years of love and trust and shared history. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. Thank you, Lily whispered. For what? For seeing me that day in Martha's boarding house, for not looking away from my scars, for making me believe I was worth saving. Jake cupped her face in his hands, his blue eyes intense. You saved yourself, Lily. You found the courage to leave, to start over, to open your heart again, even when you were terrified. I just had the incredible good fortune to be there when you did. We saved each other, she said, remembering a similar conversation years ago. That is what love is supposed to do. They returned to Johnson City and to their life, which continued to unfold in all its beautiful complexity. James went to college in Austin, studying to be a lawyer. Sarah married a young rancher and gave them their first grandchild, a daughter she named Martha in honor of her great-great-aunt. William took over the day-to-day operations of the ranch, proving to have an almost uncanny ability with horses. Emma, the baby, surprised everyone by declaring she wanted to be a doctor, an ambition they supported even though it was nearly unheard of for women. Jake and Lily grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies slowing, but their love only deepening with time. They celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 35th. They saw the turn of the century together, marveling at how much the world had changed from the wild Texas of their youth. On a warm spring evening in 1907, Jake and Lily sat together on their porch, watching the sun set just as they had countless times before. Jake was 62 now, his dark hair gone silver, his face deeply lined but still handsome. Lily was 51, still teaching though she talked about retiring soon to spend more time with their growing collection of grandchildren. "Do you remember the day we met?" Jake asked suddenly. "How could I forget? I was so scared of everything, including my own shadow. And there you were, this kind cowboy who looked at me like I was worth something." "You were worth everything," he corrected. "You just didn't know it yet." She took his hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of 3 decades of practice. "I know it now. Thanks to you. Thanks to us," he said. "This life we built, it took both of us. Your courage and my stubbornness, your intelligence and my optimism. We made something beautiful together, Lily." "We did," she agreed, looking out at the ranch that sprawled before them, at the house where they had raised 4 children, at the garden she had tended for 30 years. "We really did." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to deep purple, the first stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the house, they could hear the sounds of their youngest daughter, who was visiting for a few days, moving around in the kitchen. "I love you," Jake said, as he had said thousands of times over the years, but it never got old. "I love you too," Lily replied, as she had replied thousands of times, meaning it more with each repetition. The nightmares had stopped years ago, replaced by dreams of the life she was living, the life she had built from the ashes of the old one. The scars on her arms were barely visible now, faded by time and thousands of days spent in the Texas sun. But she would never forget what they represented. They were a reminder of how far she had come, of the strength it took to survive, of the courage required to trust again. Jake had seen those scars and said she was safe. He had kept that promise every single day since, and in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift imaginable, the freedom to become herself, fully and completely without fear. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to shine in earnest, Lily leaned her head against Jake's shoulder and thought about that frightened woman who had stepped off a stagecoach 31 years ago. She wished she could tell her younger self that everything would be all right, that the pain would fade, that happiness was not just possible, but waiting just around the corner in the form of a blue-eyed cowboy with a gentle heart. But perhaps she didn't need to. That woman had found her own way to this moment, had made the impossibly brave choice to keep living, keep hoping, keep trying. And in the end, that had made all the difference. "What are you thinking about?" Jake asked, as he so often did. "About how lucky I am," Lily said simply. "About how this beautiful life almost didn't happen because I was too scared to believe in it. About how grateful I am that you didn't give up on me, even when I had given up on myself." "Never," Jake said firmly. "I knew from the beginning that you were someone special, someone worth fighting for. I would have waited forever if that is what it took." "Good thing you didn't have to," she teased gently. "Best thing that ever happened to me, you walking into Martha's boarding house that day," he said. "Changed my whole life." "Changed mine too," Lily agreed. "Saved it, really." They continued sitting together as the night deepened around them. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting. The Wild West of their youth was fading into history, replaced by automobiles and electricity and all manner of modern conveniences. But some things remained constant: love, family, the quiet satisfaction of a life lived with purpose and meaning. Eventually, they went inside, ready for bed, but not quite ready to end the day. They moved through the familiar routine of closing up the house, checking windows, and banking the fire in the stove. Emma had already retired to her room, leaving them alone in the quiet house that had witnessed so much of their life together. In their bedroom, Jake helped Lily with the buttons on her dress as he had done thousands of times before. She no longer flinched at his touch, no longer expected pain where there was only gentleness. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder, and she turned to smile at him, this man who had taught her what love was supposed to look like. "Happy anniversary," he said. "Our anniversary was 2 months ago," she reminded him. "I know, but I am grateful for you every day, not just on anniversaries." She reached up to cup his cheek, feeling the slight roughness of stubble beneath her palm. "I am grateful for you too, for every day we have had together and every day still to come." They settled into bed, Jake pulling Lily close against him in the way they had slept for 30 years. She fit perfectly against his side, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. It was their place, as familiar as breathing. "Good night, Lily," Jake murmured into the darkness. "Good night, Jake," she replied softly. "I love you. I love you too. Always." She closed her eyes, feeling safe and loved, and profoundly, incredibly blessed. The woman who had carried scars hidden under her long sleeves was still part of her, would always be part of her, but she was no longer defined by those scars. She was defined instead by the life she had built after them, by the love she had found and nurtured, by the children she had raised and the students she had taught. She was Lily Callahan, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and teacher. She was strong and brave and worthy of love. She knew that now, bone deep and certain in a way she had never known it before. And it had all started with a cowboy who saw her scars and offered her something she had thought was lost forever: safety, respect, and the promise of a better tomorrow. In the darkness of their bedroom, wrapped in her husband's arms, Lily smiled and let herself drift into sleep. Tomorrow would bring new joys and challenges, but they would face them together as they had faced everything else. That was the gift of their love, the promise they had made and kept for 30 years. They were partners, equals, two halves of a whole that was stronger together than either could be alone. And that, Lily thought in the moments before sleep claimed her, was the happiest ending she could have ever imagined. Years continued to unfold, bringing changes both large and small. The ranch prospered under William's management, and Jake officially retired in 1910, though he still went out to check on the horses most mornings. Lily retired from teaching the same year after training her replacement and ensuring all her students would be well cared for. They spent their days in the gentle rhythms of a long life well lived, surrounded by children and grandchildren who brought laughter and chaos in equal measure. In 1912, they celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with a party that seemed to include half of Johnson City. Their 4 children were all there with their families, giving Jake and Lily a total of 11 grandchildren to spoil and delight in. The house overflowed with noise and love, and as Lily looked around at the life they had created, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Jake found her later that evening, standing on the porch and looking out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. He slipped an arm around her waist, and she leaned into him automatically. "Quite a day," he said. "Quite a life," she corrected. Who would have thought that scared woman who stepped off the stagecoach would end up here with all of this? "I would have," Jake said simply. "I always knew you were destined for great things, Lily. You just needed the chance to discover it for yourself." She turned to look at him, this man who had been her rock and her champion, her lover and her best friend. His face was deeply lined now, his hair completely silver, but to her he was as handsome as the day they met. "I could not have done it without you." "We did it together," he said, as he always did. "That is how the best things in life work." They stood together under the stars, holding each other close, grateful for every moment they had been given. The scars on Lily's arms were nearly invisible now, faded to the faintest of lines, but she would never forget what they represented. They were proof that she had survived, that she had overcome, that she had found the courage to trust again even when every instinct told her not to. Jake had seen those scars and said she was safe, and then he had spent the rest of his life proving it, day after day, year after year, until safety became not just a promise, but a lived reality. Inside the house, their family laughed and talked, their children's children running around with the boundless energy of youth. This was their legacy, Lily thought. Not just the ranch or the house, but this love that had grown and multiplied, touching every life that came into contact with it. "Come back inside," Jake said gently. "They will be cutting the cake soon, and you know Emma will be upset if we miss it." "Just another minute," Lily said. "I want to remember this exactly as it is. Perfect and beautiful, and more than I ever dreamed possible." "It is not over yet," Jake reminded her with a smile. "We still have years ahead of us, God willing. More birthdays, more anniversaries, more moments like this." "I know," she said, "and I intend to treasure every single one." They returned to the party, to their family, to the life they had built from nothing but hope and determination and love. And as Lily cut the anniversary cake with Jake's hand over hers, surrounded by the people who meant everything to them, she thought about that moment 35 years ago when a cowboy saw her scars and offered her safety. It had been the beginning of everything, the start of a love story that had weathered every storm, overcome every obstacle, and grown stronger with each passing year. It was a love built on respect and trust, on patience and understanding, on the willingness to see past the scars to the person beneath. Jake had seen her when she was invisible, valued her when she thought she was worthless, loved her when she believed she was unlovable. He had given her the space and time to heal, the security to grow, the freedom to become fully herself. And in return, she had given him her whole heart, holding nothing back, trusting him with the most vulnerable parts of herself. It was, she thought, as she looked around at their family, their friends, their life, the greatest gift two people could give each other. Not just love, but the kind of love that transforms, that heals, that makes everything possible. And it had all started with a simple promise from a cowboy to a scared woman with scars hidden under her long sleeves. "You're safe now." He had meant it then. He had proven it every day since. And Lily knew with absolute certainty that she would be safe with him for the rest of her days. That was the happy ending she had never dared to dream of. And it was more beautiful than any fairy tale because it was real. It was her life, hard-won and deeply cherished, built on the ashes of her past and reaching toward a future full of promise. As the party continued around them and Jake pulled her close for a dance in the crowded parlor, Lily closed her eyes and sent up a silent prayer of thanks. For this man, for this life, for the courage it took to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. She had survived. She had healed. She had loved and been loved in return. And in the end, that was everything. The scars remained, faded but present, a permanent reminder of where she had been. But they no longer defined her. Instead, they were simply part of her story, the dark chapter that made the bright ending all the more precious. She was Lily Callahan, and she was safe. She was loved. She was home. And that finally and forever was enough.